While we wait for the next step in Ark Raiders' journey to launch, let's run through what we know so far about the game's narrative, so that when you finally get to jump into the game, you'll have a better sense of why you're actually playing as a raider. Before we dive into the Ark Raiders lore, if this is your first time viewing my channel, just know that I've been following each step of Ark Raiders' road to launch since 2019, longer than any other content creator out there, so you can expect a decent depth of knowledge and detail about this game from me. If that sounds like the sort of content you'd like to see more of, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I'm also part of Embark Studios' content creator program, and although this particular video isn't sponsored by them, I've tagged it as a promotion to keep that relationship nice and transparent. Okay, with that gratuitous ad for my channel and disclosure out of the way, let's talk game lore. We've already had a bunch of information, and there are some inferences we can make that help us to narrow down the history leading up to the present time in-game. Some of that info came to us before the most recent tech test, so we probably need to assume that some of these details might have already changed, but I think the overall picture we can work out here won't have changed too much. Up front, we're told that the current year in-game is 2180, and it's also clear that things on Earth are not what we would consider to be normal. We have a community living underground in Speranza, which is a neighborhood of a city called Toledo, which is located in the part of the world that was formerly known as Italy. Above ground, the Rust Belt is a dystopian environment packed with rundown buildings, abandoned and rusted vehicles, and debris, all of which is actively patrolled by a variety of Ark machines in the air, on the ground, or mounted on and in buildings. So Ark machines above ground, humans below, but what does Ark actually stand for? Well, we're not entirely sure. It could simply be a reference to the arc-shaped lines that are shown on the radar screens when Ark are entering the atmosphere, and towards the end of each round we even hear the head of Speranza's security, Shani, saying Ark's on screen, which could easily fit with that. Or it could be an acronym for something like Alien Robotic Craft, which I suggested in a video a long time ago. However, there is some key evidence for the origins of the Ark machines, which suggests they're not of alien origin, but I'll come back to that later in the video. Back underground, it might come as some surprise that Speranza isn't entirely made up of raiders. In one of the opening cinematics for the game, after you complete your character customization, one of the characters narrating the piece says, "A lot of people down here in Speranza rely on raiders," implying that raiders might only make up a relatively small portion of Speranza's community, and that their value to the community is high because of what they bring back to base. As part of the very first quest you receive in the game from Shani, she says, "Look, if you're hoping to stay in Speranza, I'll need to know you can handle yourself up there," and she sends you up to the surface, which means you're pretty much told either you become a raider or you're out. So how did this situation arise, where Ark machines patrol the surface and a community of people live underground? Well, firstly, we've previously been told during a developer presentation that the game's dystopian environment came about as a result of a global environmental collapse. We don't know too many specifics about that, or a specific date for when it occurred, but we can narrow down a date based on some other details we have, which help to build up the overall timeline for us. The spaceport map is a location that we know was used during a period called the Exodus Age. This was when humans were committed to a mass exodus off the planet following the environmental collapse in an effort to survive. Some graffiti on the map, which was captured here by my buddy Meister, who runs the Ditopia Discord where I hang out. There's a link in the video description, so join us. The graffiti includes what looks like the year 2054, which if written in that year, would place the start of the construction of the spaceport buildings, possibly solely built for the planned exodus, no later than that year. A lot of the derelict technology found around the maps appears to be at latest from the late 1970s or early 1980s, which combined with that 2054 graffiti could narrow down the start of the environmental collapse as being sometime between about the late 1970s and 2054. So we have the environmental collapse, then the mass exodus, and then a period between that and the arrival of the Ark machines, and the date for that Ark arrival we can also narrow down. We're told on Celeste's trader profile that she survived the first wave of Ark machines, Adding to that, way back in late 2021, when Ark Raiders still had a PvE co-op focus, the game's website said this about Celeste. She was uprooted and abandoned and lost everything to Ark. Yet she picked herself up, built a new home, and forged a new family of diverse and skillful resistance fighters, the Raiders. I think that narrative could easily still stand. Celeste appears to be no older than about 40 years of age. And if we assume from that previous narrative info where we learn that she lost her family, that she was probably a child, maybe aged between 5 and 15 when the first Ark attacks occurred, that would place the start of the first wave sometime between 2145 and 2155. And if the first wave of Ark attacks has been given a name, the first wave, then there must have been at least a second, if not more, waves of attacks, which we'd place between, say, 2155 and the current year of 2180. All of that time between Celeste surviving the first wave, arriving into Speranza, and then going through one or more additional Ark waves also provides her the time she would have needed to be seen as a valuable member of the community and eventually end up running the place. A few rounds into the tech test, another cinematic played, which told us about the Raider camps we see on the surface. The camps. Feels like forever we could spend our nights on the surface, when we still thought we had a chance against the machines. Precious few still believe these days. Now we cower underground, scramble over scraps, feels like a different world, yet the camps still stand. It sounds like these camps might have been built during or around the first wave of attacks, and then abandoned when it became clear that Ark were winning the war. So we have this general timeline which also tells us that there was a period of maybe 100 years or even more between the Exodus age when humans were fleeing Earth and when Ark first turned up. Basically a dystopian survival phase for the humans that remained. And that leads us to a few questions. Firstly, during the Exodus age, why were some humans left behind? On that graffiti wall on Spaceport we saw previously, there's a few interesting clues. One line reads, "Fata spazio per tutti," which translated means "make room for everyone," and "uguaglianza per tutti," which is equality for all. It sounds like some people were being excluded from the Exodus, and this is also backed up by this graffiti on the buried city map near the spawn point on the derelict highway, which reads, "Solo arricchi vanno via da questo schifo," which translates to "only the rich leave this shit." It seems the opportunity to escape during the Exodus became a wealth-based thing, at a guess maybe driven by the companies that were providing the transport. Potentially supporting that is this almost Banksy-style graffiti seen on the dam map, which has fashioned the logo for Astra Aventuro, a company whose name could link it to space travel during the Exodus age, into a wolf biting down on a little girl, perhaps a symbol of corporate control around those wanting to escape Earth. And we also see some graffiti that reads, "Arurolare resistere," which is enlist, resist, the tagline that Ark Raiders has had since its very first trailer. Maybe originally this phrase was about the poor rising up to demand the opportunity to leave Earth for everyone, and the phrase was eventually repurposed as a call to arms against Ark during the first wave of attacks. Somewhere in the middle of all this, droids appeared. We see one of these amongst the traders as the sassy Lance, who perhaps slightly macabrely also has a couple of defunct droids sitting in the back of his workshop. Maybe he's like some weird droid version of Dr. Frankenstein, who replaces parts of his own body with bits from other droids he's found lying around the Rust Belt. A couple of droid bodies could also be found lying on the spaceport map, so perhaps, originally, these were intended for use during the Exodus, maybe as spaceport workers or security, which could also have come in handy if some people were going to be excluded from the flights off Earth. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier, where do Ark come from? Are they alien? Are they human-made? Well, if you inspect some of the Ark parts that can be looted when they're downed, you can see human letters and numbers on them. So this presents a couple of narrative options. What I think is the less likely is that the spaceships that left during the Exodus were intercepted by aliens and the parts repurposed to build the Ark machines. I think it's more likely that either a renegade faction or the entire group of descendants that left during the Exodus have built the Ark machines and are using them to do a couple of things. We know that the Queen guards a harvester that's sending resources back into space, so there's definitely a supply aspect to Ark's presence, but maybe they're also making ready for a safe return to Earth for their owners, who want to remove any current inhabitants before they arrive, so they're not faced with an immediate civil war against some battle-hardened raiders. And if that's correct, I think that makes for some very interesting narrative paths that Ark Raiders might take as a game in the years following its release. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. A big thank you to the members of my channel for their ongoing support, especially to Linksy, who is my first Black Tier member. Thanks for joining, Linksy. And also thanks to Embark Studios for having me as part of their content creator program. Both are greatly appreciated. Do the usual YouTube business if you want to see more videos from me from now on. Give a like or comment as you see fit, and enjoy the rest of your day. Kia kaha. Stay strong.
Everybody knows the world ain't right. Down on your knees, get up and fight.